All right, guys. Hey, everybody. So, welcome. Excited to have everyone here today as we tackle some of the most debated topics in AppSec, right? So, we're going to talk about, application security posture management, the general ASPM landscape. We'll start kind of at a higher level and dive a little bit deeper on specific topics. But these are topics that have been kind of debated, rapidly evolving, so on and so forth. And I'm excited to bring you a really high level list of panelists here today. So, just to introduce myself, my name is Amir Kazemi. So, I'm the director of product marketing here at Cycode. And as I mentioned, I'm joined by this really all star panel. So, super excited to bring to you Pramod Gosavi and then also Nico Pop, as well as our very own Jimmy Zhu, our field CTO. Why don't we go ahead and start with some brief intros around the room? Pramod, if you don't mind, starting us off.
Yeah, sure. So thanks a lot for having me. So currently I'm an investor at Bloomberg Capital, focusing a lot on AIX. So it's AI application in cybersecurity, IT, also on vertical use cases like finance and supply chain. Prior to that, I was at another firm, and before that, I was at VMware for some time. Yeah, this space is really we are not investors in this particular space, but this space has been a passion for me to follow and comment on.
Yeah. Thanks, Pramod. We're super excited to have you on board. Nico, if you don't mind, give us an intro.
Yeah, thank you, Amir. Thank you for having me. Quick intro. I tell people I'm an engineer by training, a product guy by passion, and a sales guy by necessity. So 25 plus years executive in cyber, very science, semantic, false point, tenable, and probably forgot something in the middle. Right, currently I'm an advisor with Crosspoint Capital. And when you love security, you can't leave it, right? It's like Hotel California. So looking forward to the dialogue today.
Absolutely. Yeah, looking forward to having you in the discussion. Thanks, Nico. And then, of course, Jimmy Zhu of Cycode.
Thanks, Amir. Obviously, everybody know my role now at Cycode, but today I'm going to put on my hat of my, the practitioner journey. So prior to Cycode, I did a little bit of everything. I was a practitioner. Have done security AppSec, DevSecOps for a long time, both public private sector, for Fortune 500, Fortune 100 clients. Most recent job, I built up a DevSecOps cloud security business of $50 million of product services. Um, I also actually advised research analysts and VCs in the space of DevSecOps and cloud security and cloud security. So today I'm excited to use the entire Jimmy, not just Cycle Jimmy, to talk about this with great friends with Mo and Nico.
Always a pleasure to have you, Jimmy. And then, obviously, if you haven't seen him before, Jimmy's Hot Take Thursdays are definitely one of a kind on LinkedIn. So definitely, connect with him there. Okay, so ASPM as a category, I think, over the past couple of years, 2, 3 years, it's evolved, right? I think it didn't initially start as ASPM, but we've seen the category evolve over time, and we kind of look at it as different waves, right? But the definition, I think the boundaries, where it's all headed is kind of up for debate. So today we're going to dive a little bit deeper on that, break it down a little bit. And where I wanted to start off is a little bit broader. So what does ASPM actually mean to each of you? I know the definition's kind of been all over the place. Um, I think Gartner may have coined the term back in 2023 here, but as a market, where do you think, it's headed? And also ASPM as a definition, what does it even actually mean to you guys? Um, Pramod, do you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah. So ASPM actually started as ASOC. So there was another term called ASOC, and Gartner is very good at changing and coming up with new acronyms. So the old ASOC was application security orchestration and correlation, actually not control, and that was a term until 2021. And so that was the first generation of the ASPM companies, and so one of the notable companies in that era was CodeDX, that was acquired by Synopsys, and then couple of those companies started in 2021. I would say they were holding on to the ASOC space. So what they were doing is they were correlating all of the scanner results, orchestrating it. So think of like a SOAR for application security. So that existed, I would say, like 2021, 22, right? At the same time, there was another concept called supply chain security that came up, and you guys are focusing on that, is focusing through the CI/CD tools, identity, um, maybe even like bringing in the production results, right? So there used to be another thing called supply chain security, and then ASOC was on the orchestration, and then on the core SCA and static scanning, and that was just what was called an application security, right? I think fast forward, what has happened is, though Gartner has come up with a slightly broader ASPM definition, but I would go back to Gartner and tell them to just make it as a like a holistic, application security management or something like that. Maybe not posture management. So now, fast forward in 2025, I feel like ASPM is a holistic, what I call as a control plane that
Mhm.
goes across, developer to production, and then covers, the scanners, the CI/CD pipelines, and touches a bit on production. So I will pause here. I'll give other people opportunity to speak.
Yeah, that's a great way to start us. Thanks, Pramod. Nico, do you want to go next?
Yeah,
What's your
let me
take?
rebound. I think Pramod is right on. That's the way it started as a standalone product. And I think it got hijacked by the incumbent because, to borrow a term from Nikesh, right? What we saw is the platformization, and I hate that term, but I think people will understand it. The platformization of AppSec, and so the incumbent realized. Well, first, what happened is the sneak of the world realized, oh, I need to do SaaS, right? Not just SCA. So the SaaS guys say, wait a second, they're coming. So we're going to go the other way. We'll add SaaS to our SCA, and then people realize, let's do that. Let's do ISA security. It's the whole AppSec. So all the incumbents decided to say, I'm going to provide all the scanners and to sell all the scanners together and pretend it's integrated, right, as a platform. They realized the easy button to integrate all these scanners was to bring the data together. So most of them, I think, look around and bought some ASPM to say, this is the platform that brings all my, disparate product together. So I think that was the phase two. That was the hijack of a really, really good idea, and to bring AppSec together from a go-to-market standpoint.
Yep, yep. No, that's an interesting perspective, more from the incumbent point of view and the platformization there. Yeah. And then, of course, Jimmy, I know you've had a lot of thoughts on this, definition and category yourself. So would love to, get your take.
Yeah, of course. This is the Jimmy, right? Not Psycho Jimmy per se. Um, I definitely agree with Pramod and Nico. Absolutely, I would have probably said the same thing. I remember in 2020, I was working with Zero North, for example, with the founders over there, and they later got acquired by Harness as the security tax illustration. So just to Pramod's point, right? Just a couple of vendors out there. And when I was doing my consulting business with, helping clients, we actually built stuff like that, right? A lot of the large clients in the Fortune 100s, they use outside help or themselves built somewhat a tool that's similar to the ASOC-like feature to orchestrate various tools. To Nicholas' point, right? I mean, things gets crazy, and I would say that the supply chain thing gets interesting. I've worked, even before the cloud security, the CNAP gets changing every week, month, it seems like. The CSPM, right? The DSPM or SSPM, the other SPMs all have something different than ASPM in the sense that everything else focuses on the configuration layer, right? The control plane. So and I think Pramod said it, Nico said it, right? When you think about the entirety of application security, the pipeline, the configuration layer of the delivery mechanism, uh, the public sector call it software factory. I think the term gets a bit more in the private sector. I think that's more aligned with the proper definition of SPM based on every other category. But because application is so complicated, right? And that's why, it's not like a SSPM where that PM is looking at the SaaS platform's configuration. I think it's entire end to end. That's why, to combine what Nico and Pramil said, I think that the term gets poisoned by marketing, by vendors. We think definitely need a new term that encompasses the holistic of app security, that includes the control plane, the code level, and everything else. And obviously, not here to debate whether that includes scanner or not scanner, but definitely it should be more of a holistic definition.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's good. It sounds like the commonalities here is though that there needs to be a shakeup in the maybe the Gartner MQ or the definition on AST in general, right? We're seeing an evolution there. Also, promote to your point, it started out as ASOC, evolved into ASPM, and you saw also the software supply chain security vendors. We kind of look at those in the three different waves internally here, but wave one was all about the standalone ASPMs. Then you had the software supply chain security ones, and then what we call complete is more of like what Nico kind of touched on the platformization, bringing those scanners together. So yeah, I see a lot of overlap in kind of the point of view here, which is good. Not too much differences, but good to see that this definition is slowly converging over time. I wanted to touch on, you know, should ASPMs expand into broader vulnerability management? Where we are today, do you think that ASPMs should expand into RBVM? What is kind of your take there? So, some ASPMs in the market or some so-called quote unquote ASPMs are pushing into this broader vuln management space, while others are staying a little bit more focused on just AppSec in general. Would love to kind of break that down, hear your thoughts around that, and maybe we'll start the other way around. Jimmy, if you want to give your thoughts on this.
Yeah, this is definitely a controversial one. I'm excited to talk about. What's interesting is, in the current landscape of ASPM, right, from a vendor perspective, you have the ones that more supply chain focused. You have the one that's purely an aggregator, right? Like to Kamal's point, the ASOC plus, call them. And then you have the ones with scanners, right? Whether it's organically built like Cycode or acquisition, like, the Snake Vericode and all that, right? So uh, the ones that actually are pushing the UVM together is the ones that don't have more of an organic aggregator only, the ASOC view, which makes sense in the sense that, um, what can you do? You're going to add more connectors. Over time, you're going to bleed into the infrastructure space. But my opinion is that the whole reason that ASOC started was because UVM didn't work for AppSec, right? So going backwards, right? I remember when I was working with clients that they have to build something like that to get scanners because back then the Canna of the world didn't work. So I think that there's going to be overlap based on just the market. I believe what makes ASPM different than UVM, which is a complementary, is that ASPM needs to be more close to the developers, to the preventative. I'm not going to use the word shift left, but more of a pre-production. Be integrate with developers, get remediation to them, right, the right context. Whereas UVM is more operational, more holistic. I think ASPM is a sub-component of the UVM, but not the same. Would it be one day? Maybe. I know Nico hates the term platformization, but I don't see it anytime soon. I see they're very distinct, integrated, complementary solution.
Great, that's awesome. Thanks, Jimmy. Nico.
So no and yes. That way I can disagree with everybody.
Yeah.
I hope. So when I was at Tenable, right, we look at VM very IT centric, RBVM very IT centric, very device centric, all devices, laptops, web
Yeah.
server, and then AppSec was really on the left. Now, what's interesting in the middle is something called cloud security, right? Which started at CSPM, and then people realized there's also VM, right? And then there is KIM, and it became bigger and bigger and became CNAM. So I think to me and there is VM in there, and to me that's the most relevant because you deploy your code mostly on the cloud, right? These applications are cloud native. And so if you think about the competition of ASPM vendors, you have the incumbents on the left, which I mentioned.
Yeah.
If you look on the right, you have the cloud security guys. And I think of Wiz in particular, right? They launched Wiz Code, and I can predict they're going to do SaaS. They only launched SCA, but SaaS is coming. Now, why is it dangerous? Because if your code has vulnerability, that vulnerability is way more dangerous if your container has a vol, an SCA vol, if that container is exposed to the internet as privileged access, right? That vulnerability that can be exploited gives you can be remotely exploited, and you have the keys of the castle. So that the context of the cloud infrastructure with the weaknesses of the application is way more interesting. We always call it toxic combination. So
Yeah.
there's a clear value of bringing the toxic combination of weaknesses in your own code and the weaknesses in the cloud infrastructure, which, by the way, belong to DevOps as well. So I think that is the real convergence. So VM, if you want, traditional VM is like one step further to the right. So if you go from left to right, I think so no, because it's not really VM. Yes, because cloud security is a lot about VM. It's about a vuln is a vuln is a vuln, a software vuln, an access vuln, a configuration vuln, still a vuln. So yes and no. And I think the real danger is that platformization of CNAPP and AppSec. And we're already seeing it with the leading vendor.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you thinking that vuln management, ASPM, and CNAP all coming together here in the future?
I think that's
Um,
the first stop. And then, by the way,
yeah.
we can talk about the next stop, but
Yeah.
it's because it's the adjacency,
Yeah.
right? You platformize AppSec, and then you look
Yeah.
on the right. My app goes to infrastructure. It's called cloud infrastructure. Do you have
Yeah.
too much access, over entitlement? Do you have opening system vol, right? Snapshot scanning. Do you have misconfiguration
Hmm.
in my Kubernetes cluster? All these things have to be contextualized together. All these weaknesses have to be looked at together.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like an interesting thing because you said vuln management in general or RBVM started out on more on the IT side, so with assets and physical, hardware, right? So
There
primarily,
was no cloud 20 years ago when
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
is.
So, but the primary persona here is generally going to be IT, right? So
That's right.
the question
Different
is like,
buyer,
now, how are you
right?
going to collaborate with?
Actually, it's not the buyer. The buyer is still the CISO, which
Okay,
is great. I think when we looked at AppSec at Tenable, what bothered us is the buyer we thought was very developer centric,
yeah,
right? And the traditional VM buyer is security, right? And to make things worse, the people who fix the vulnerabilities are IT ops. So now
yeah,
you had a third component,
okay.
which is the developer, which was like, it felt like it was one bridge too far.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, and that's kind of evolved and shifted, with the cloud and DevOps and so on and so
The
forth, right?
cloud is the bridge, in my opinion,
Yeah,
right?
the bridge.
The cloud becomes the bridge because
Yeah,
CSPM is VM, right? And then every CSPM vendor does snapshot scanning, agentless VM scanning. They're all doing VM, all of them.
yeah. Oh, very interesting. Thanks, Nico. Pramod would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yes, I like to disagree with Nico because he said
Hey,
yes and no. So I'm going to
turn
say
on the
no and
lights.
yes.
Finally, we have a disagreement here.
So I will say no and yes. So it's both a disagreement and agreement. And the reason I say no is I think there is a lot on both the sides. So think of vulnerability management, like RBVM, as Nico mentioned, like there's on-prem, there's a cloud, right? So if you look at Wiz, right, like a lot of people don't understand, like Wiz is a modern day vulnerability solution. It's a modern day Tenable. Like Nico doesn't want to agree to that, but it's a
I
modern
agree.
day
I agree. It's a
vulnerability
modern Tenable.
solution, and it's a very much of a pure play vulnerability solution where they have spent like last 3-4 years just perfecting vulnerability management just in the cloud, right? And there's a lot to do there, and they're coming up with different ways. Now they're coming with eBPF and everything. So it's all for vulnerability management just for the cloud, right? So now if you take on-prem and then application, I just feel like it's just too much for one vendor to do vulnerability management. and then the ASPM, right? So the way I think about it, like vulnerability management is you need to go end to end, like development to cloud. But I feel like it's so much to do. Like you just said, the cloud, like Wiz is spending so much time in the cloud, they're not even touching. I mean, right now they acquired a company and they're trying to get on the development side, but for a while they just had so much to do there. Yes. So to sum it up, I think that those are two are like very very meaty propositions, right? Like
Yeah.
you cannot do both, and I feel like you can do a lot just staying on the application side, right? Like I said, if you become a control plane for the whole AppSec, and also the buyer is different, right? So as you guys mentioned, the buyer on the vulnerability management is IT and security. Here it's developers are the ones that are using it. So things have to change your go to market, your pricing, packaging, if you just focus on the application layer, right? So for those reasons, I just don't think that any company can do it. I think Palo Alto wants to do it. They might acquire something, but
Yeah.
I feel like just from a go to market, pricing, packaging, it's just better to keep it separate and then focus separately with separate teams and separate DNA, and don't try to merge. I mean, this whole code to cloud, they say, okay, it's merging everything, but I think it's like a pipe dream to me. Like, just keep it separate.
Yeah. 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 No, that's great, Pramod. Jimmy, do you have a thought?
Just want to add, I wish I'm disagree with EW, but I can't yet. You'll find something later. But it's code to cloud now. It's code to cloud SOC, right? I think that balance will promote SEP too much. So you gotta
Yeah.
pivot, right? Let's add in the SOC.
Yeah. So I
You,
guess we're
oh,
in agreement that we're. Oh,
no, no,
sorry. Go
let me
ahead.
disagree. I think you'll be surprised how the power of good enough security with customers,
Yeah.
because that consolidation give a price advantage. And in these times of, economic hardship, there is the reason platformization is actually real is it's an ROI, right? It's a cost decrease. So, you know,
Hmm.
I'll, I've seen good enough VM, bid VM, not at the top of the pyramid, right? The Fortune 2000, but very often uh, an integrator with a subpar solution, maybe in AppSec, and a good solution in cloud security can make a dent in the market and can hurt a pure play. So I agree with Pamela. They're not going to be as good everywhere, but the economic power of bundling things together cannot be, overlooked.
Yeah, definitely the ROI advantage to this as well. Um, yeah, really good conversation. I wanted to kind of switch gears, but kind of stay on the same level here, around consolidation or kind of like marrying two different categories. We've heard kind of the concept of ASPM and CNAPs working well together. Are these two separate things? Are they standalone? Does ASPM absorb CNAP? Does CNAP absorb ASPM? What are kind of the thoughts there around just this broader like discussion? I think, it's a hot topic that's happened over the last year, especially with tons of acquisitions happening in the space. So wanted to get your thoughts around, you know, pro expansion or pro consolidation, anti expansion consolidation. So why don't we start there? Maybe Jimmy, you want to kind of kick us off?
Me again? Oh man. So I think that I know I've written a blog about this. I know Pramod talked about it in the last question about too much. I think it's too much for a vendor to do, right? I'm not here to throw jabs at any particular vendor, but again, look at Palo Alto, for example, the Prisma Cloud thing. I mean, there's a reason. I think from the outside looking, right? I mean, it didn't really work, right? I was the hands-on installer, they don't integrate. I think fundamentally, if you look at Wiz, great, they built a great foundation DNA in the cloud, but everything happened in the cloud. Going back to the from a technical perspective, it's one thing that to have correlate the services to the uh, the endpoints, you have snapshots, whatever using eBPF agent. That's everything happening to mobile operation. When you look at this development, if you want to take both to merge them, you have to be really as good in the cloud as in the development. It's not just looking at the code and pipeline, right? You have it's crazy to map repositories to projects to dev teams to developers based on mono repo whatever. Just so much, and then you got look different type of build workflows across different tools. You got branches, commits. It's crazy. How do you make sense of all that? So it's a DNA. I think that not never saying impossible, but I think they're two separate categories. Can vendors, own them all by acquisition for sure? But if we just from a purist perspective, um, the ASPM is the merge, right? You can't do ASPM without the runtime context from some of those, but I think they're fundamentally separate categories. Just like like CNAP reference, right? I remember CNAP used to be just CSPM plus CWPP, and you got CAM, but now DSPM. I don't know. I don't. But DSPM is trying to get broader data security. So I would argue the same thing is DSPM. I mean, it's like a tug of war, like the traditional data security versus CNAP, DSP in the middle. I think same thing. AppSec, CNAP, ASP in the middle. I think that they're separate. Doesn't mean the vendor can't buy or build, but I think categorically they're different.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jimmy. Why don't we go this way? Pramod, you're next.
Yes, I think as I mentioned in my previous comment, right? I think there's a lot to do there. I think I would like to see, the ASPM companies and CNAP companies actually work together, right? Like, share data, share scanning results, right? But again, due to the ambitions, and what you have seen is like the ASPM companies, is still very early, but some of them are finding it hard to scale. So they think of a platform on the CNAP side as a good platform because they have customers, so I can sell it much more easily, right? That's why you're seeing that consolidation with some of the ASPM companies selling themselves to CNAP companies. It's mainly from a go-to-market. Yeah, I think I think as Nico said, it is good enough, and also there are market forces, right? So the market forces might eventually make this consolidated because it doesn't make sense to run a fully dedicated on the ESPN's side, just on the application side, right? Yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that, saying that I do think that they need to survive separately. They need to integrate with each other, but we don't know whether the market forces will allow it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Pramod. Nico, would love to hear your thoughts on this.
That's perfect. The French disagree with everybody. So I think consolidation is like the second law of physics. Entropy always builds. So consolidation always happens. In addition, Wiz has crossed the Rubicon, right? They basically say, I can do SCA. They've already said that. Interestingly, I thought Palo Alto would then, by the way, they would buy. Nobody's going to build, right? Especially in that Palo Alto. So I thought they were going to buy an AppSec company, but instead it's interesting. Instead of going to the left, they went right. Right? They basically brought Cortex or whatever they call it these days to the party. So now they're saying from code to cloud to SOC. So it's like it's not even CNAP meets AppSec. It's CNAP meets maybe AppSec and XDR, right? Or SIEM, whatever, in one package. So I believe that consolidation is inevitable. Security is a very fragmented market. Private should be happy. There'll be a lot of acquisitions. All investors should be happy. The incumbent will buy. I think Palo will have to react to Wiz. I think Wiz will be more aggressive in AppSec. By the way, rumor was a few years ago, Palo tried to buy Snyk, right? So I think they may try again. So yeah, no, I think they'll come together. They have to come together.
Yeah. That's an interesting take right there. Yeah, it's yet to see like how it's gonna shake out and evolve over the next year or two. It's
Be
gonna
fun
be
to watch.
yeah, it'll be fun to watch, definitely. Okay, so speaking of kind of game-changing shifts and topics here, let's kind of roll into the open grep versus sem-grep debate here. I know this has been kind of deep into, Twitter, LinkedIn battle, so on and so forth. But it's been a hot topic in AppSec in general. So would love to hear everyone's thoughts on, what's going on here, what it means for vendors, customers, and just the general space in itself. So maybe Pramod, you can kick us off here on your
Yeah.
take.
So as I mentioned in my LinkedIn post, right? I mean, as a VC, I think I have to protect VC investments. So I do feel like like SemGraph for a while they invested a lot in the open source, and we'd like to see the company becoming successful, right? But what has happened is I think the ASPM companies came in, and I feel it's a very natural transition. Like somebody said this really well, like the only way to monetize open source is like maintenance or a higher level service, right? Like what Amazon did with all the open source, they provided a service, and then people started complaining that they are copying open source, but that's the right way to actually, because otherwise you have to install it, run it on your own, right? So it's always better to have a service. So I feel like the ASPM is a service when it comes to open source scanning, right? So they provided a service, they packaged it, they provided all of the elements, right? So I think what they did made sense from market forces, and I do think that SemGraph was a little bit slower at uh, at creating ASPM. They just announced ASPM this year, but overall, as I said, I think the market forces are dictating this consolidation, right? And I think, I mean, I don't think that the open source is going to work well at all in this ecosystem, because again, you need to provide a bunch of services, and you need to provide it as a full service rather than like a standalone like open source where you need to install it and run it on your own. But having said that, I think open source is also the best go to market when it comes to developers, right? So developers don't have the budget themselves. So if you need to give something to the developer, that's the best way to do it. And Nico mentioned Sneak, right? So Sneak is one of the amazing companies of our time, where they started with a really good open source model, and then now they are monetizing through an enterprise go to market, right? So that worked for them, because I think they didn't have that service layer that somebody came and monetized that. But when it comes to like static scanning, ASPM is that natural service layer. Yeah, so I'll just leave it at that, saying that open source is still the best GTM initially to get your product in the hands of developers, but I think very quickly you need to figure out if anyone else can come and commoditize you and provide a better service wrapping your open source, or you should do it yourself. I feel like SemGraph, delayed that a lot. Like Sneak, I think very quickly they realized that the open source was not monetizing on its own, and they started a enterprise go to market.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think open source, to your point, lends itself to a good bottoms up developer motion from a go-to-market perspective. And it's yet to be seen, though, from a, capabilities perspective, whether or not like open source, even SaaS engines or AST providers can live up to the enterprise versions as well. So I know Jimmy can touch on that too, but Nico would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. In cyber, open source doesn't monetize. I don't know of any open source project that's actually, to Pramad's point, right? I think it's really hard. So what happens is open source is really used by the vendors, the startups, to actually as a go-to-market, and they monetize by providing a stack that's actually very different than the open
Yeah.
source. So really, it doesn't hurt the customers. It hurts the startups that rely on that tech for their
Hmm.
solution, right? I like to quote Nessus because 20 years ago, right? Nessus went from open source to basically tenable, right? And guess what? No big deal, right? The planets are still circling the sun, right? The galaxy is still okay. Customers are okay. And then, by the way, we had a open vase. Has been, the child of Nessus has been very successful. So I anticipate the same thing will happen. Nobody will care in a
Yeah.
year, and there'll be an open source alternative that is probably might be striving. And by the way, without not even talking about AI yet, so somebody had to launch the word, right? That will have an impact on these scanners as well in a huge way, right? So
Yeah.
since this is coding is a verifiable domain in AI, so we know they're going to be tremendous progress. AI model is going to be very good at math, and very good at programming, so they should be very good at detecting insecure programming.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Hold that thought on AI. We'll get to that
Okay.
in a minute here. But Jimmy, would love to your thoughts on this, the open source and the
Oh,
SEMrupt controversy.
well, I feel like the heat has subsided since they first came out. There's a lot of heat. I haven't sensed from Primero and Nico the heat less. I feel like at this point, someone's being forgotten, right? And that's kind of like the current state is kind of my response. I think that, yeah, just citing history, right? So, I mean, I was working alongside with Sneak, on the reseller side. I mean, that's good. That example of a good model that worked, right? From that to commercialization. And I think that open source is a good way to get into that community. Um, I know I have plenty of friends slash customers who actually built up a good chunk of custom SemGrip rules, right? I mean, it works for people. Probably good for the consulting services people as well. But I think for the open grip, SemGrip, I think both sides could have done a little better, right? SemGrip should have reacted way quickly, right? Have it, put some model in there. I think open grip, I don't know if they probably should have relied less on on that as part of their go-to-market. Um, I think the world is seeing open grip just going to be, a talk or going to be something advanced. But I think that validates the fact that if you are a vendor, right, the impact of that is SaaS commoditized? Right? I'm not going to answer this question yet, but I think that what this happened is going to challenge the vendors who are having SaaS in their portfolio, especially ASPM vendors. Hey, you better do something extraordinary now, right? Otherwise, why would you buy? And it's almost like being exposed. So I think it's good. I think there should be a separation that open source, hey, if you can build your own hack at the bench, do it. But if you want to commercialize, you better have something more than just rules. So I think it's good that it happened. I think it challenges vendors. I don't know about how VCs think. But I think overall it's good for the customers. I can tell you whether that happened or not. I asked my customers, friends, hey, did you get impacted at all with the license change? They said no. So that's good. I feel like if the customer's protected, that's great. But I think it does up the game for the vendors, which is why I'm excited. The Cycode Field CTO answer is, well, I'm glad that we bought Bear, right? So it's almost like Cycode did exactly what Sneak did with Deep Code in 2020. But, I think that might happen with other vendors who want to get into the SPM space, whether it's pivot from scanners or a new somebody come in, they got to realize, hey, that avenue is dead. We got to do something else. So that's good.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. Thanks, Jimmy. Um, we held the topic on AI. You can't have a good panel discussion or a webinar without talking about AI. So I wanted to touch on that. Where do you guys think AI is going to impact AppSec or even ASPM in general, or even the broader market? I think we're seeing a lot of, talk. There's marketing around how it impacts productivity around security, work around developers, those kind of swim lanes and functions. So would love your thoughts on, where's the real impact and where's kind of the real value here. So Jimmy, if you want to go ahead and kick us off here.
Oh, that's a loaded topic. Obviously, I think by now everybody knows that to simplify this, there's really two sides, right? Security for AI, AI for security. I think that security for AI is probably more low-hanging fruit because the pace of what organizations are building AI, especially generative AI, right? You want to have some kind of security solution to, mitigate that. That part, I think that's just going to be a lot. I mean, I'm sure the investors probably are closer to it. I think that market is more interesting, personally. Probably have a faster cycle of growth just because what's happening, right? I think AI for security is more interesting. It's like the Me Too syndrome now, right? It's like you can't have anything, especially in the market we're talking about here, if you just focus on the world of app security, right? It's crazy that I think there's some philosophical discussions like the conflict of interest, right? I think I was at a conference or a summit with City Ventures last year, on DevOps DevSecOps Summit. One of the topics was developer of 2030. Um, I know the founder of Poolside talked about, hey, in 2030, right? One day it will be, right now is AI led, AI developer led, AI assisted. One day it will be AI led, developer assisted. I think over time the code, if you talk about just development, all that, I think as AI mature, I think one day it will get there, but it will be a long time. I think over time, security value might get less, but I think you never trust AI, right? You still need it. But I think right now there's a huge gap. I don't think anybody's there yet, anytime close. When one of the largest provider of GitHub Copilot, right, provides now Copilot has agent mode, but we all know that code from Copilot is not secure, right? You still, that means there's ways to do. But then you got the GitHub Advanced Security, CodeQL has AI assisted. So it's like, okay, is it the same engine? So there's a lot of work to do. So I think right now, it's more hype. But I think it does means that we've got to have some kind of AI to scale, but it's not just focused on the core remediation. I think there are other ways of AI that can help, surface issues or, I think I see more of, I don't know what we do in Cycode, but how do you use agentic AI to actually use some of the manual triaging better versus focus on using AI to make the code security more precise. So,
Yeah.
but still early. I think that it's going to take a little bit to see where we're going.
Yeah. Thanks, Jimmy. Why don't we go this way? Nico, if you can go next.
Yeah. So okay. So like Jimmy, right? There is AppSec for AI, right? Because AI is supply chain, right? Software. And I was reading the Reversing Lab blog where they can actually scan an open source model on a Hugging Face and find basically backdoors, right? So I think a lot of the AI startups are doing AppSec for AI, and that'll be subsumed by AppSec vendors. I think to also rebound on what you said, Jimmy, I do think that the scanner is getting commoditized. So that's why it's irrelevant that open source is no longer open source, and AI will do very good code scanning. They're going to get really, really good. So this kind of gets commoditized. So I think it's an invitation for ASPM to do something that customer really needs. I talk about the plagues of security. There are two plagues in security. We generate alerts and we generate weak vulnerabilities. And then, we tell people, great, I give you visibility. I don't care about visibility. I've got visibility. Great. I want to give you prioritization. I don't give doubt about prioritization. If I want to go to jail, I have to fix my critical and my high. So I know exactly what my critical and high. I don't care about your risk score. What I want is, can you fix these vulnerabilities for me? That is, to me, that's the killer use case. Can you take that pain away? And that doesn't mean open a ticket and create a pull request. That's not fixing, right? It's like take the pain away. And I think that's where AI could at least, and by the way, there are multiple ways to take the pain away. I'm going to plug my good friends at Tuscara. You can remove, dependency. You can change control point. Have a Cloudflare. That vulnerability doesn't matter. You don't need to patch it. And the third part will be AI can generate the code. Do you want me to actually, check in that code that can actually fix that vulnerability? I mean, there's a lot of interesting things to actually bring ASPM to something that fixes problem versus exposes more problem. And I think AI is going to be at the center of that. And whether the scanner is there or not, nobody will care because the scanner will be commoditized.
Interesting. Very interesting take. I love that, Nico. Thanks. Pramod, would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, just touching on the scanner being commoditized, right? I think people are spreading further saying that scanner is commoditizing. I think it's commoditizing for the right reason, and I feel like nobody's actually saying that. And you guys can say it. I give you some marketing material for that. I think it's getting commoditized because this.
Robert, enumerating CVs is a commodity.
It is a commodity, but there's even a bigger commoditization happening, right? So the bigger commoditization happening is, like I always say, that the so there's CVs on the open source side, and it's bad code and like things that people observe things, right? And then there's vulnerabilities on the custom code side, right? So I always say that like previously, junior engineer come doesn't know how to code, writes bad code, and like the scanners will tell you all the faults and you fix it, right? So what AI is doing is like you can see like the success of the companies like Cursor and others, right? Where it's people are generating a lot of code with AI, right? So and a lot of that code is not perfect, but I think it's better than what a first year engineer would write, right? So that's a big commoditization that is coming on the scanner side. Is like a lot of the code is going to be almost there, right? But having said that, I think the need of ASPM is still there, right? So you still need an orchestration layer, control layer for that. Like what is actually getting commoditized is a data plane, which is, and this data plane is commoditizing for two reasons. Like one on the custom code side, you have AI, and then on the open source side, you can bring in like clean images, right? So there's another school of thought is to just like don't scan at all, like just bring in clean images every day, and then you don't need to scan at all, right? So those two things are really commoditizing for the right reasons, right? And these are technical reasons why it's happening. So let me just come back to AI, right? So right now I feel like there's a stopgap, and you see companies like Sneak like really making a lot of money is to fix the bad code with AI generated code, right? So Sneak is like almost making $100 million by AI assisted like fixes for your bad code. But I think that is like a stopgap temporary. In 1 or 2 years, this code is starting to become cleaner and cleaner, and you cannot. There's not much value with an AI generated code because both the versions are going to look the same, right? So to sum it up, I think that commoditization is happening on the data side. Like you're going to get more and more cleaner code both on the custom as well as open source. But I think the need for ASPM still exists. Can you use AI there? I think it's still TBD. Like I said, like right now the use case of AI to me is like to bring in AI generated fixes, which I think is like temporary. Long term, can we see AI in that control plane? I don't know yet. Maybe we can have more on the fixing of the tickets and everything side, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a super interesting take. If you see the commoditization on the scanning side, do you also see on the flip side, you'd probably see commoditization and in just code generation in general, right? They're both kind of like moving towards this inflection point.
Yep.
But yeah, the ASPM data contextualization data plane layer is super interesting as well. Want to kind of end it at one more question here around just your kind of vision on where you think AppSec is headed, like over the next 3 to 5 years. How do you think the AppSec space is going to evolve? It doesn't have to be necessarily just ASPM, but I think we touched on a few of these topics, but just in general, in like maybe one or two lines, what do you think? Um, Nico, do you want to kick us off?
Okay, I'll start. I think the the first part that where AppSec needs to extend is this supply chain attack. So I think the integrity check of the artifacts needs to be integrated into AppSec. Maybe that's more tactical, that's more immediate. In the long run, I do think it merges with cloud security for the reason I invoked. I think the real innovation in AppSec is how do I optimize my security? How do I do things so I don't have to fix my vulnerabilities? Because I have a lot of legacy code, right? Like that's where the green source doesn't always, or the green container doesn't always work because it's hard to fix AppSec around legacy code. So to me, the future of AppSec is that closed loop where I find the vulnerabilities, I contextualize the vulnerabilities, and I take the pain away for you. And I'll find a solution. I'll tell you, you don't depend on it. It's not exploitable, or you can defend it by putting CrowdStrike, in that workload, and configuring CrowdStrike so you're protected. So I think that to me, that's the grail of AppSec. It's like it's no longer enumeration of problem. It's the full loop of, and that's where ASPM I think can lead the pack. I will optimize your cyber defense and everything else to actually make sure that I minimize the number of exploitable vulnerabilities and that all that is automated. So it's that remediation mitigation
Yeah.
loop that to me is missing from AppSec in addition to the integrity checking. That's my view of where I'm trying to invest. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
Great. Thanks, Nico. Pramod, do you want to go next?
Um, can you just repeat the question? I think I missed the
Yeah,
original
just
question.
at a high level, where do you think
Yeah,
the future
the
of AppSec's
AppSec is
going
going
with this
right.
feature?
So I think where I'm interested right now is like think of a post cursor like AI generated word, right? Like somebody just tweeted saying that they save like 3 hours writing the code because the tool gave them a code, but then they spent 3 more hours to actually debug a code because it introduced a bug that was not very obvious, right? So I think where AppSec needs to go is maybe at a higher level,
Yeah.
at maybe like right now it's just too much at a code level, at a file level. It needs to go at a architecture level, right? So on the scanning side, like people say it's commoditizing, but maybe they need to go up the stack also. They need to get an architecture level, an application level, and look for bugs and defects there.
Yeah. Thank you, Pramod. And then Jimmy, do you want to kind of give your thoughts on this? Thoughts or hot
Yeah,
takes?
probably both. That's a big question, and to give a simple, one rather simple answer.
Yeah, very
Look,
loaded.
I guess great, well said by Nico and Pramod. Add a little bit of a practitioner lens, right? If I summarize AppSec, I think if you look at the broader future with AI, with the quality code generated AI going to get cleaner and cleaner. I think over time, it will get better. But I would say there are two problems, right? Two categories. One is net new stuff coming from now going, what is net new applications usually are more modern stack, right? Using these new stuff, new tools. But I know that for Fortune 100 and below, the existing backlog of the old stack, including the ones that are still in data center on-prem, that they're too expensive to refactor, still there. So I think holistically in the future, something what counts for both. I think the new stuff is going to be okay and get less. But I think it goes back to what both Nico and Ramon touched on. I think that how do you contextualize old ones better, right? At a higher level, right? Not just looking at that. What if this AI can refactor a legacy application like that? And adding security, right? To me, probably not 3 to 5 years, maybe 5 to 10 years. But immediately, if you can just contextualize it, do a little better on the control plane, and surface that and fix it, right? Using with AI, using whatever other ways, that could be better, right? It's not just going to be scanning old code. It will be a lot more than that. So supply chain, everything else. That's what I think. I think we still a lot to go on the, I know this is a technology focus, but I think there's so much to do to educate from a people and process aspect of it. Hopefully I get to see the future AppSec that the people bring along so that the people being making decisions are not just get hyped by the marketing and do the right things. Last thing I'm going to say is for the new stuff, just acknowledgement, not disagreement that, you know, from a solution perspective, you have to tie them together, right? You can't just not looking at the one plane. We went from looking at the code to the whole code to infrastructure. They're blending together, especially for the new stack. There are vendors out there, have open source SDKs out there that you can just add to your favorite language to provision infrastructure now, right? So it's merging, but so the AppSec should be holistic. Look at them together from the start. That's
Okay.
my thought.
Thank you so much, Jimmy. Looks like we're just about out of time right now. Such a fantastic conversation, guys. Pramod, Nico, Jimmy, thank you so much for the discussion and the time here. If you guys want to connect with either Pramod, Nico, or Jimmy, feel free to connect with them on LinkedIn. I'm sure they'll be able to connect with you there. Otherwise, thanks again for joining us, and we'll stay tuned for the next episode. Bye, guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me.
No problem.